Good evening. This week's Parsha is Parshas Toldos, and before we begin with the Divrei Torah and the thoughts on Toldos that I want to share with you this evening, I want to respond to a message I got on my telephone from someone who lives in England and listens to this share each and every week. And he wanted clarification on an item which I'm going to take 2 minutes to discuss in response to his request, because I think it's worthy of the time and the information I think is useful for each and every one of us. I mentioned last week, Parshas Chayesara, that the story of Eliezer, he went to find a shidduch, and when he found Rivka and everything that happened, and brought back Rivka to marry Yitzchak. She took the veil and she covered herself. She covered her face. And I said that that's where the source of Badekun, that when we come to a chasna before the chassan kala go to the chuppah, the chassan goes and he takes the veil and he covers the face of the kala. At that point, I said that there was shefa and bracha she brings down to him. And likewise, when they get under the chuppah, the chassan then walks around the kala. The kala walks, around the chassan. He gives her the brachas at the time of the badekun, and she gives the brachas to the chassan as she walks around him. The question from the gentleman from England was, what is the source and where do we find this? So I want to tell you that if you look at the Mamorim of Chabad, that before at a chasna by the Kabbalah's Panim, the chassan says a mimer, which is entitled L'chod Dodi Likras Kala Panei Shabbos Nekabala, and one time is from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and from his Shver, Zechuso Yogin Oleinu, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and they don't call it in the Maimer Shefa or Bracha. They call it Makiv, which is a very prominent term used in Chabad, that there is an Ora Makiv that is loaded with the potential of Bracha, and there are times that a person in his life can get that Makiv. So at the Chasna, and that's what the Maimer is about, even though there are other tzaddikim from other lineage, not Chabad, who also talk about it, and also more in the bracha and shefa terms than Chabad. Chabad speaks only about makif, and they even say that the chassan gives the kala when he does the veil covering, and when she gives him, when she walks around him, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the chuppah is the makif for the entire ceremony. And that's what they discuss there. And that is an excellent source. You should look it up, become familiar, and you will enjoy it. So what I want to begin with is, we know that in this Sedra that Rivka told, after the whole story of Yaakov successfully getting the brachas, and we find that that Rivka said to Yitzchak that if Yaakov Avinu is going to take a girl to get married, from there, the Benos Kanani, Lama Lichayim, what do I have to be alive for? In other words, she was very distressed, so Yitzchak called in Yaakov and said, go to my brother-in-law, to Lavan, to my father-in-law, Besuel, and do a shidduch over there. And that's in our next week's Sedra. That's how our Sedra, Toldos, ends off. And he ends up leaving, and he went to the Yeshiva of Shem Va'ever for a number of years, and then he came finally to Lavan and stayed there with Lavan and married Rachel and Leah. So this is also a response to someone who inquired to something that I said. That I had said that Sarah Imenu had nevuah, but Rivka and Rachel and Leah did not have nevuah. So I was asked that it says beferish that Rivka said that why should I lose Lama Eshkal Gam Shneichem Biyom Echod, that it came out that Yaakov and Esav would end up dying on the same day, and she said it, Chazal say, with nevuah. So it's a stira. But Mefarshim explained that Sarah Imenu, some hold that she was the only one that had actual nevuah. Rivka and Rachel and Leah had Ruach HaKodesh and Baskol, which is lower than Nevuah. Others say that they all had Nevuah, but Sarah's Nevuah was like the first level of Nevuah, the highest level of Nevuah. Now, if you take a look at the Gemara in Megillah, the Gemara in Megillah says that there were Zion Nevias, that there were 7. And it says Sarah and Avigail, and it continues the list. Rachel, Leah, and Rivka are not mentioned. It's a Gemara in Megillah. So I just want to say to you that there are different opinions about the levels of their Ruach HaKodesh or their Baskol, but the one that seems to be, according to everyone, the highest level and the purest level of Nevuah is Sarah Imenu. Now, the opening pasuk says, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham holid es Yitzchak. And Rashi brings in the Chazal, why does it have to be repeated? If it says, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, why does it say, Avraham holid es Yitzchak? So, one of the terutzim that Chazal say is because that to disregard the leitzonei hador, the cynics, the guys that are full of sarcasm, and the Chazal say that the leitzonei hador would say, oh, they couldn't give birth for such a long time, Yitzchak, and because he was by Avimelech and Rivka was there, so that's how she became, how she was expecting from Avimelech. So the pasuk comes to tell you that these are the Toldos. We're going to share with you the generations of Yitzchak. But you should know that Avram holed as Yitzchak, that the pasuk is myriad, and underscores to take away from the late Sonei Hador. But the question that many ask is, who cares what the jokers and the cynics say or think? That means we had to have in a pasuk extra words to exclude the cynics? Let the cynics fly a kite. Who cares what they think and what they say? But the answer the Meforshim say that until Mashiach comes, these Leitzonei Hador can be ma'akev so much, because until Mashiach comes, there is the koyach hara, the koyach of the samach mem, of the Yetzer Hara, whatever name you want to give it. And we, for instance, have hairs on the tefillin. Those hairs are there, says the Arizal, because the Samach Mem is so jealous of a Yid putting on tefillin and the mitzvah and all the light and all the glory and luster in Shemayim that happens, like pushing a button and the heavens light up by the Yid putting on the tefillin, that he goes crazy. And we have the hairs on the tefillin to be able to pacify that samach mem, that we throw him a bone. Now we could ask the same question, who cares if the samach mem? He's against all mitzvahs, he's against Torah learning, he puts every obstacle up. But we have to make an effort to be able to dissuade and to diminish and devour that samach mem. After Mashiach, there'll be no more samach mem. We won't have to worry about all of this. And it says that's why we have mayim achroinim. The Gemara says because if someone touches the melech Sodomis, he could blind himself, chas v'sholom. But the Arizal says that we have after a Suda, that so many neshamas have their tikkun through the kavanas that the person has and the divrei Torah and the nigunim that are sung at that Suda. It's mala in the food that have so many neshamas that are waiting for their tikkun to go back to their place in Gan Eden. It's through our divrei Torah and our singing at the Sudas, l'shem shamayim. And the Satan is absolutely, like it says that there's malachim who escort the person home from shul. And when he comes into the house, if at the table it is set up, and it is L'Koved Shabbos adorned with bechers and wine and ready to make kiddush and to have a lechem mishnah and everything else, the Satan is not happy at all. And when they leave the house, when we say Tzeichem L'Shalom, one of them is in a terrible mood and sets out to find a way to cause destruction and to cause interruption and to cause ways to derail the train on its way for the glorification of Kavod Shamayim entirely with that which we do at a Suda and to stop it. So we wash mayim achroinim is to throw a bone to the samach mem. And that's what the Arizal says. So these Leitzonei Hador we have to be concerned about. We do care that they're out there trying to say that Yitzchak was born from Avimelech, and therefore the pasuk has to come to dissuade, diminish, devour these Leitzonei Hador. Another answer, because the question is asked, that you start off that these are the generations of Yitzchak ben Avram. So what should follow the next words? You should begin with the generations. It says, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. So the next word should be a listing of some of the children or some of the doros, but we don't. We go back and we say Avram Holidas Yitzchak. That's not the generations of Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. We're going back to the father. So the answer the Meforshim say is because by Yiddish doros, generations by a Yid, are an offspring and a tolda of the grandparents and the Elta Zayda and the Elta Baba, that they inculcated and implanted and instilled and put, etched into the essence of each and every child how to say Krishma, how to have Negelwasser by the bed, how to say over a Dvar Torah with the full kavod and the full seriousness. So when we're talking about Toldos, generations of Yitzchak ben Avram, we go back and mention his father, because everything that he got was part and parcel of his growing up and seeing how his father said a bracha. And that's how we give it over generation to generation. You know, it says that that Yitzchak Avinu was the only one that his name of the three Avos that was not changed. Avram became Avraham, and Yaakov became Yisrael. But Yitzchak's name was never changed. And the Meforshim say, interestingly, because in our Sedra, we're dealing with wells. And Avram Avinu had dug wells, and the Pelishtim came and filled up with Ophir, with dirt, all the wells so that they couldn't take out any water. But Yitzchak and our Sedra came back and reopened all of them, and he called exactly the name of the well, what his father had called it. And the Meforshim say, interesting, just because of that, Yitzchak Avinu, the Oila Tamima, who was never allowed to step foot out of Eretz Yisrael. Avram Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, but not Yitzchak, because he was an Oila Tamima, he was not allowed to step out of Eretz Yisrael. And I tell you always before Sukkot, that what is the proof that every Yid has in his sukkah, Avira de Eretz Yisrael, the aroma and the air of Eretz in his sukkah? Because, and we answer, because Yitzchak Avinu is one of the Ushpizin, and he's not allowed to step out of Eretz Yisrael. So because we invite him as the Ushpizin and he's there in the sukkah, there must be Avira de Eretz Yisrael in the sukkah for Yitzchak to be there. But the Meforshim say because Yitzchak did not, because his father, his whole life, Avram Avinu wanted his scholars of the Shechina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into every person. And that's why he was busy being Magayer, and he was doing this and that to bring Yidden Tacha, to bring every person Tachas kanfei ashchina. And when he named the wells, it was that the person, Be'er lachai roim, Keil oilam, always attaching it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And because Yitzchak came back and made sure that the names were reinstated, not only the Be'er, the water, and we know that the wells, that the first two were, were destroyed, and Yitzchak came back and revived them. But the third one he called Rechovos, because that's connected the third base of Mikdash that will never be destroyed. So every little thing that we have, let's say in Bereshit, that looks like a big storybook, is to implant and to be able to have in the neshamas of all the descendants the power to be able to revive and attach themselves to Yitzchak Avinu, that brought back the Be'er Mayim Chayim. And that is so important by Klal Yisrael. Water, and that's why a Be'er Mayim Chayim, if you look in mikvaos, the highest level of a mikvah is Mayim Chayim. And in some cases, the next level is a Be'er because it goes through certain channels in the ground that differentiates between Be'er Mayim Chayim and Mayonos, a Mayon. But like a river is 100% kshera for a woman to go toivel in it. You have to be careful, you have to know what you're doing before you do it. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was separated from his Rebbetzin for 11 years because he didn't have access to a mikveh. And that's why Rav David Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, and Rav Reuven Feinstein, he should be well, Ad Me'av Yesrim Shana, are 11 years apart in age. Rav David was older than Rav Reuven by 11 years. But I want to say to you that when Rivka finally, she was 3 years old when they got married, and Yitzchak was 40, and they didn't have children, Yaakov and Esav, until she was 23. It was 20 years later after they got married. And Yitzchak was 60. The pasuk says in the beginning of our set, V'Yitzchak ben shishim shana beledes osam. He was 60 years old. And then suddenly she saw Vayisrotzetsu habonim bekirba, that she thought it was only one child. And they were fighting to go out. Look at Rashi, look at the Medrash, that he wanted to go out. She passed a church, he wanted to go out. And lahavdil, she passed a Beis Medrash, a shul, a makom kadosh, he wanted to go out. So vatelech lama zeh anochi vatelech lidrosh es Hashem. She said, what do I need this pregnancy? If this child wants to go out by the church and by the shul, what's going on? So she went and asked Hashem. So Vayomer Hashem law, Hashem answered her question. Shnei goyim bevitnech, ushnei le'umim mime'ayach yiparedu, ula'om milom ye'emotz, V'rav ya'avod so'ir. The answer to your question, Rivka, is you have two babies, you have twins in your body. And then it says that she was comforted and consoled. So I ask you, Why was she consoled? So there were two inside of her. So she understood that one wants to run out to the church, but the other one is going to be a kadosh, a tahor, a tzaddik. Why was she comforted that one of her kids was going to be wanted to go out to a church? But the answer is that when a person is consistent, even for bad, you can have a stronger chance of his return because he's consistent. But if it's one person who is trying at the same time to dance on both sides of the fence, then your chances of any hope for that person is going to be very bad. And that's why we always said about the reform, not the people who are in the temples, but the leadership who not only say that this is the religion, but this is the real thing. In other words, they don't admit that for 3,500 years people were keeping the Torah the way it says, the kashrus, making a bris on the 8th day, doing everything that they're supposed to do al pi Torah. Then suddenly one day, a guy wakes up and he says, that's it. It's like a person driving down Fifth Avenue at 90 miles an hour. So the police stop him and ask him, this is a 25-mile-an-hour zone. What are you doing driving 90 miles an hour? He said, well, I've decided today that it was 25 miles an hour, but I today decided that from now on it's going to be 90 miles an hour. Who authorized? The reform woke up one day, well, from now on we're doing this and that. Who authorized them? Who gave them the reshus to do what they do? But like they asked, Ad Mosai, Atem, Poischim, Ad Mosai, Atem, Poischim, Bishnei, Shtei Seifim, until when, Alicia asked, are you going to dance on both sides of the fence? And that falsehood of trying to portray oneself, one day he's this, and one day he's that. He's in Borough Park in a shul, and if someone behind him is talking, he turns around and he says, are you allowed to talk in the middle of Chazaras Hashat? And he's right. But not if he goes the next month down to Florida and he's mixed swimming. You can't be inconsistent. And that was Rivka's answer that made her happy, because she said, one of the kids is going to be bad, wants to jump out to the church. We're going to work with him. We're going to show him extra love. We're going to show him how to be able to go down a path of what he's supposed to be and where he is supposed to be. Now, it says that Vayigdalu Hanaorim, that Yaakov and Esav grew up. Says Rashi, and the Gemara says it, that Vayigdalu means they were bar mitzvah. And Avram Avinu was nifter. He was supposed to live 180 years. He lived only 175. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that Esav is going to become such a rasha. I don't want Avram Avinu, my tzaddik, ki yedativ, I love him, to suffer the pain and the anguish of seeing what his Einikel's doing. It says on the day of his bar mitzvah, he went out and killed someone, shvichas domim. he went and was Oived Avodah Zarah, and he went out and violated women, married women, which was Gilui Arroyos. He did 5 major Averas that day, the day of his bar mitzvah. And Avram Avinu was nifter not to see what was going on with his anicle, to save him from that pain. And when Esav came back to the house, they were returning from the burial in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And the halacha is that when somebody, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, in the family dies, and they come back from the cemetery, that they have to eat their first meal, whether it's a snack or a meal, they have to eat from someone else's food. So a neighbor that knows the person had to go bury a father, a mother, somebody in the family is coming home to sit shiva, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, they bring in a tuna fish sandwich, a piece of chicken, whatever they bring in for him, it does not belong to the oval. Now, commonly, they bring in the first thing an egg, because it shows an egg is round, it's not square, there's no corner point on an egg. It's round, it goes round and round, to show that neshamas go round and round, because we know that many people are born into the world and they do not live up to what they have to live up to, and they have to come back as a Gilgul, reincarnation. They come back again, they're born, and we know from the Arizal, who lived 450 years ago, that most people in this door, especially the door before Mashiach, are Gilgulim, that we lived before and we came back to fix up, and no one knows what they had to fix. But the Mekubolim said that if a person sees that it's hard for him to stop doing a certain Aveira, then it's a simon, that's why he came back. He should know that that's why he's back in this world. If he's sitting around a whole day talking Lashon Hara in the luncheonette, did you hear what's doing by this one, by that one? You're busy with all the Lashon Hara. He's back because of the Lashon Hara. And the Chavetz Chaim says that when a person spoke Lashon Hara and there was the Beis HaMikdash, he became a Metzora. We say leprosy, but it's not leprosy because it's a very ruchnius, spiritual affliction to the person. I mean, leprosy, it goes on the wall of the house, it goes onto the begodim, on the clothes. So the Chavetz Chaim says, now that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, and if a person's talking Lashon Hara, so what happens to him? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Anios. He becomes very poverty-stricken. His parnasa is with his last drop of koyach, of strength, to be able to pay his bills. And he goes through life like this until he's misaken. And if he's misaken, he stops talking the Lashon Hara, he could suddenly have a breakthrough and he's successful in a business. So says the Chavetz Chaim. So, and you could do a lentil soup, because lentils are beans, they're round also. And that's exactly what Yaakov Avinu was doing. He was preparing for his father, who was coming home from the Levaya of Avram Avinu, and he was going to sit Shiva, and he had to eat something that was prepared for him. So he was preparing a lentil soup. The pasuk says it. And in comes Esav after he did these 5 Averas, And he was so famished that he said, Hine anochi holech lomos. I am about to literally die right now. I am so famished. If I don't eat something quickly, I'll be dead. So Yaakov Avinu was in the middle of making the soup, and he asked him, Haliteni na min ha'adom hazeh? Ki ayef anochi. I am tired. And it's the first time in the Torah that you find the word oyev, tired. Because when Yidden do mitzvahs, it says, V'kovei Hashem yachlifu koyach. That Yidden could be running around feeding people, davening with fervor and zest and zeal, and they could be learning Torah with zest and zeal. They could be doing their avodah a whole day, and they're totally knocked out by the end of the day. But in doing good things, V'koivei Hashem yachlifu koyach, we get that extra siyata dishmaya and that extra dose of strength which comes to the person above and beyond because he's doing mitzvahs. But Esav was coming home from doing averis and he was ready to die. So he asked in desperation, Yaakov, give me from this soup, or I'm going to die. So Yaakov Avinu answers him, oh, you want the soup? Sell me your bechor. Now, it would look on the surface to someone mean-spirited. I mean, the man's about to die. Is that your answer? Oh, you want to eat so you can live? Okay, sell me your birthright. It didn't look like a reasonable time to ask to sell the birthright. The man says he's famished, he's got to eat. First feed him. But the pasuk says, and look in the pasuk, Michra kayom es bechorascha li. Sell me today the bechor. Why is the word kayom put in? All the Meforshim ask, what is the word kayom doing there? But Yaakov was explaining himself. I'm giving you to eat, but before we do it, I'm asking you for the bechor because it doesn't mean a thing to you. You're living with yom, with kayom, that what you could do today to enjoy, to fill all of your lusts, and to be able to have it in that day. You're not worried about tomorrow, Olam Haba, or any of that. That doesn't mean a thing to you. So for that reason, I'm asking you at this moment to sell me your bechor. And he did it. And it says at the end of this whole discussion, Vayivez Esav es ha-bechora, that Esav hated the bechor. Why does it have to say that? Obviously, it meant nothing to him if he sold it to Yaakov. So the Meforshim explain, because there are two types of people. There are people who lose in a situation. That means they were part of a dinner committee with two other people, and one of them was appointed to be chairman, and the other one was going to deliver the address, and this third one felt offended, so he's walking away. And he comes up, no, things are developing, the Sudas for this per kala, or the Malava Malka for the shul, is doing very well without me. And that's the end of the conversation. But then there's people that they leave the position of being one of three for a dvar mitzvah, and then they begin their discussions with everyone at Kiddush. Oh, I left because this guy was trying to grab a nerd. He doesn't have his disappointment for his bruised ego and leaves it at that. But he continues to be able to be negative to the nth degree as much as possible. And he's always bad-mouthing, and he's always... That's two type of people, and that's what Esav was. Bad enough that the Bechor did not mean a thing to him. But Vayivez Esav es HaBechor, that Esav hated, and he expressed himself, that it meant nothing. Now, in one of those psukim, it says that Esav vayehav Yitzchak es Esav v'Rivka oheves es Yaakov. And it says, why is vayehav ovar? And Verivka Oheves is present. One is past tense and one is current, present tense. So the Meforshim say, because by Goyim, it's who you are today. If a guy was an outstanding professor and he wrote books and he gave tremendous lecture, and then one day he got sick and he's sitting at home. So what is he today? Ineffective, sitting in his house, a nobody. But by Yidden, and that's why it says by Yitzchak, the Avar, because it's what the person, it's his past and what currently he is. And then he gets the chashivas. But what he was in the past, it means nothing. But by Yidden, whatever the person was remains currently, no matter what happened to him, if he lived a worthy life and a life which excelled in ruchnius and in everything that he did. And we don't take a negative, there was once a Talmud, a very famous letter of Rav Hutner, Zechrona Livrocha. Rav Hutner was the Rosh Yeshiva of Chaim Berlin. And he was nifter, 30 or 40 years ago, a long time ago. And one of his Talmidim once wrote him a letter that I feel I'm a hypocrite because in yeshiva, every minute was important, davening, learning. And now I went out into business and I'm still learning. I have kaviyas and I have sessions but here I'm learning and I'm into the learning, but I'm also working 9 hours a day. So how do I justify and reconcile what I feel is this way and that way? So Rav Hutner wrote him back that when a Yid, and Rav Pam used to say this also all the time, that when a Yid goes to work, Adam Liomel Yulod, that if he has to support a family and himself, there is nothing wrong. It's admirable that he goes out and makes parnasa. But you are still kula ruchni. Because when your time is available, you're busy learning. When your time is available, you're busy davening. When your time is available, you're helping community, you're helping people, and you're doing. And that's what Dr. Wallach, who was the chief surgeon or physician, the chief medical doctor of Sha'arei Tzedek in Yerushalayim, and he one time came over to a patient who was about to go into the operating room, and before the patient went in, he asked him what his mother's name was. So the patient, who was still not over-drugged or anything, asked him, what's the difference? So Dr. Wallach said, because I want to say a few kapitlach Tillim for you to have your surgery successful. So it wasn't that he was a doctor and left the ruchnius at the front door. He was permeated, every fiber of his being was ruchnius, and his healing process was l'shem shamayim. He wasn't Messiah Das from the Rabbanu Shalom while he was doing an operation. He was doing it to save a Yid and to be able to have the Yid go back to his Avodas Hashem and to do it with his entire being, every fiber of his being. But when it came to Esav, the pasuk says that Esav was ish tzayid, ish sodeh. He was a hunter in the field. V'Yaakov ish tam yoshev oholim. So the Meforshim asked that when it says about Esav, it says ish tzayid, a hunter, ish sodeh, it says ish twice. But by Yaakov Avinu, it only says one time. Ish tam yoshev oholim. It doesn't say ish tam, ish yoshev oholim. But by Esav, that's what it says. It says ish tzayid and ish sodeh. Because Esav was ish tzayid, he was a tricky man, the Meforshim tried. I mean, simple means that he was a hunter. But he was busy fooling his father. He would come to his father with shilas. Oh, how do we take meiser from the salt? He would ask him such questions to present himself as if he was a erlich, a fine yid, and there was no problem with him. So he was ish, one man, tzayid, with his father, and ish sodeh out in the field doing what he was really doing and enjoying. But V'Yaakov, ish tam, yoshev oholim. He remained the ish tam, and also likewise every aspect of his avodas Hashem. And what he had to do was yoshev oholim. There was no separate difference. Esav was ish tzayid, fooling his father, and ish sodeh, a different man outside. But Yaakov, ish tam, busy learning, yoshev oholim, and continuing with that hasmada as he sat in the tents. It's same person, not two personalities, the one who does here one thing and then the other thing over there. Now we find that in this parsha that the brachas, Yaakov Avinu, who's called Titein Emes LiYaakov, that he is the paradigm, he is the turret, he is the shining example of truthfulness and honesty. From this parsha, it doesn't look like it. And the Meforshim even say that when he was debating his mother, and he said that if my father discovers in the middle of this whole charade who I am, I'll get cursed. He'll find out. And it even says that Yaakov Avinu was hoping to be caught because it was so against his grain. But he went along with his mother because he knew that his mother was such a tzaddikus that she couldn't be asking him to do something which was not right. And we see, by the way, that the first time after the trick worked, Yitzchak gave the brachas to Yaakov, and he left, and in comes Esav, and Esav said to his father, okay, I prepared food, and come eat it so you can give me the brachas. So he said, who are you? I gave away the brachas. Vayechrad Yitzchak charoda gedoyla adma. He was shaking. He saw Gehenna, Rashi says, open for him because he gave out the brachas to somebody that was not supposed to get it. Now, I ask all of you listeners, after Yitzchak realized that Yaakov had tricked him, what do you think Yitzchak, the first time that he saw Yaakov after this whole story, should have done? He should have yelled at him and said, what did you do? You came in and said you were Anochi Esav Bechorecha with a scheme? He should have told him off. But if you look in the Psukim, the first encounter after the story, that Yitzchak vayevorech also. Yaakov walked in, and he on the spot gave him a bracha. That was the first thing he said to him. No criticism, no anger, but he gave him a bracha. Because Yitzchak Avinu realized that what ended up happening was min hashamayim, what had to happen. And that when Yitzchak said, make me food, matamim, you wouldn't believe that the Chafetz Chaim would tell his Rebbetzin, oh, I want, you're making dinner, I want the way I like it, soft and seasoned with salt and with pepper and with... the Chafetz Chaim was into how the food tasted. So we believe Yitzchak Avinu was, but what he meant was he was giving the brachas for Klal Yisrael li'olam vo'ed. And that the shechita and the kavanas by the shechita and by the cooking had to be 100%. Or if he would eat something and it wouldn't be, he couldn't effectively translate that into ruchnius. So he said, matamim, he wants it tasty. He didn't mean the salt and the pepper. He meant the way that it should be prepared in terms of ruchnius. And we know that Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev used to go into the kitchen and smell the food. So there was one of the tzaddikim, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Baruch Mimezhebush, who used to make fun always of Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, and he did it publicly, by a tish, oh, Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, and his davening, and So somebody came to Reb Baruch Mimezhebush and said, I have a good story for you about Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. I know you don't like him, and you're always bad-mouthing him, so I want to tell you. So Reb Baruch Mimezhebush said to him, do you think I would ever say a word against Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, the Kadosh Elyon? Why do I say it? Because when he goes into the kitchen and he smells the food, he has such kavanas that in Shamayim they say, what is Klal Yisrael asking for the third Bais HaMikdash? What will happen if there is a third Bais HaMikdash? That the Kohen Gadol will be makter ketoiris lifnai v'lifnim, or on the Mizbeach each and every day, and it'll be a nachas ruach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev goes into the kitchen and smells the food, with his kavanas, it's in Shamayim like the Kohen Gadol being Makter Ketoris. So I'm trying to knock it down, that they shouldn't say you don't even need the third Bais Hamikdash. You have Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev's kavanas. And that's what Yitzchak Avinu was talking about. And the reason that Rivka wanted 2 goats, that those 2 goats that she prepared after Yaakov Avinu did the shechita and brought it to her, there were such kavanas that one of them remained the koyach of the so'ir la'Hashem and the so'ir la'Azazel for Klal Yisrael on every Yom Kippur li'olam vo'ed, that she etched into the essence of what was happening then, to be able to pick up like a crane that picks up something that's 10,000 feet, 10,000 pounds, and it needs to be a crane with all the koiches to be able to manifest what had to come out from this. And that was why it was 2. He didn't end up eating two goats. None of us could eat 2 goats. And she did bedavka too, and he ate a drop from here and a drop from there to be able to be mashlim and to internalize the koyach of those kavanas, that she should be able to have the effect that it would become the so'ir la'Hashem and the so'ir la'Azazel. So we see that the parsha is not just a simple happening over here in the shalshelis of and Yitzchak, don't forget, at that age was 63. He was 63 when this story with the brachas and with everything took place. Now, when Yaakov came into Yitzchak, Yitzchak said, "Vayorach esreach begodav," and he said, "Re'ei reach beni kareach soda asher berecho Hashem." And Rashi says, like an apple orchard, he smelled so fragrant. But the Mekubalim say that when we sing that Sdei Tapuchem, that we talk about during the Zmiris, the Sdei Tapuchem, that there's an apple orchard in Shemayim, that all that shefa comes down to Yidden Klal Yisrael from there, and that's the reason that we take the apple on Rosh Hashanah, and not an orange and not a pear, as I've said to you in the past, because it was the apple orchard. When we take that apple and we dip it in honey, we make the bracha and we say, Yi Ratzon, Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, Shetahei Shana Zu, Shana Toivu, Shetachadish Aleinu, Es Hashana Hazos, Shana Tova Mesuka, that when we say that nusach, that we're able to pull down and draw from the Sdei Tapuchem, Lamala, that apple orchard that Yitzchak was talking about right over here. I lastly want to say to you that the Medrash says on that pasuk, Vayorach es reach begodav, that he smelled the fragrance of his begodim, that the Medrash says, Al tikri begodav, don't read it clothes, ela boigdov, the traders. And who was the trader that they're referring to? That after the Romans destroyed the Bais Hamikdash, they put out a call to everyone in Klal Yisrael, whoever takes us in and shows us the hidden secret tunnels, we're going to reward tremendously. And there was only one Yid that went in and started to show them where everything was. And his name was, the Medrash says, Yosef Mishisa. Now, he went the first day, and they said, take whatever you want, and he took the menorah, and the Goyim said to him, Ein darko shel hedye bekach. This is not for you. You're picking something too, what are you going to do? Put the menorah into your living room? Go in and pick something else, simpler. But it says that the next day they wanted him to go back and to show them more. And he said he's not going back in. So they offered him 3 years of taxes of Eretz Yisrael, like offering someone $1 billion. And he said, no, I'm not going in. So the Panovitcher Rav asked, what happened? The first day he was the biggest traitor in Klal Yisrael, and he had the chutzpah to even want the menorah. And the next day, and it says that when he refused them, they tortured him to death. He died. What happened that the first day he was the only one, the traitor, and the next day, even at the expense of his life and being tortured, he wouldn't step foot in again? And he answered and said that that is the koyach of surroundings on a yid. That we could take somebody and put him into a Beis Medrash or bring him in for a Suda Shabbos, like Franz Rosenzweig, who went in and he was ready as a young man to marry a shiksa and be baptized. And he went into a shul. He had like a feeling he should just walk. He was never in his life in a shul. And the time he went in was Yom Kippur. And everyone was standing with their talesim and their kittles. And they had 2 Sifrei Torah out. And the Chazan was saying, Kol Nidre. And he was so overwhelmed that after an hour of staying there, walked out and gave up the Goyish Shidduch and said he's not converting, and he became a frum Yid 90 years ago. Because the surroundings could make such a difference to a person that it has ripple effect beyond. So said the Panovitcher Rav that the first day he was a traitor. But once he went in to show them all the secret tunnels, and he was inside all the places in the Bais Yaakov, it had such kedusha that it drenched his soul, that he was absolutely influenced to a point that he was ready to give his life up. We should find ourselves encompassed and surrounded by good people, by good occasions, and by good locations, and that all of our efforts will blossom in a greater dimension because of the influences of whom we are around, who we are with, and where we are.